Greetings, I'm Kanhenga, and welcome to this week's edition of Zimbabwe Human Rights Monitoring Platform Updates. So this week, we're looking to the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter, a Twitter trend that has gone global and has been put to light by several media personalities on Twitter. It was brought to light by Tawanda Mchechiwa's abduction that happened last week. Zimbabwean journalists have taken it upon themselves to fight against corruption through publishing and exposing any evidence of such underdealings. And amongst them, it has been international journalist Mduduzi Matutu, who is uncle to Tawanda Mchechiwa. If Tawanda Mchechiwa just happens to be, or in fact happens to be collateral damage within the pursuit of trying to find journalist Mduduzi Matutu. Zimbabwe Republic Police and state security agents raided his house and couldn't find him. Decided to actually threaten and give Mduduzi Matutu's sister an ultimatum to get Mduduzi present or they were going to come. Within the failure to do so, they ended up taking Mduduzi Matutu's nephew Tawanda Mchechiwa, whom they tortured and brutally treated in order for him to disclose information of Mduduzi's whereabouts. Discontent of citizens in Zimbabwe has caught global attention, wherein we've seen celebrities showing their humanitarian concern or showing their concern over the human rights situation in Zimbabwe. Celebrities like AKA have actually joined also the trend, the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter, by also putting a petition to politicians in South Africa to take action. We've seen Ice Cube and Beyonce also showing their concern over what's really happening in Zimbabwe. Apart from the social media impetus that it has caught, or the social media attention it has caught, it has also led to political action. South African opposition leader Julius Malema has proposed that South Africa closes down Zimbabwe's embassy in Pretoria until the human rights situation in Zimbabwe is fixed.
Our own comrades should stop the hashtag revolution and engage in the real revolution. They supported us during our struggle. We must support them now. And the most practical thing for South Africa to do, if Cyril Ramaphosa respects the human rights, as he claims to have drafted this constitution that they say is the best constitution in the world, he must withdraw the South African embassy from Zimbabwe and chase away the Zimbabwean embassy from South Africa until the rights of Zimbabweans are restored.
But however, President Cyril Ramaphosa, the head of state in South Africa, has proposed otherwise. He has summoned up an envoy which is set to come to Zimbabwe and engage with the Zimbabwean government to address these issues.
There's no way President Ramaphosa could not have raised this matter in SADC as well as the African Union. Definitely, such matters are currently out there.
Given all that, this is what the Zimbabwean government had to say in response to the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter movement.
There is no crisis or implosion in Zimbabwe. Neither has there been an abduction or war on citizens. Like any other country in the world, Zimbabwe has been enforcing COVID-19 lockdown regulations intended to safeguard and protect the lives of all citizens. Where necessary, the law has been fairly applied. The deliberate attempt to smear the country's image is betrayed by the use of doctored images, old video clips, and highly exaggerated claims on social media.
Meanwhile, in a space of 31 days, approximately 31 female activists have been arbitrarily arrested by state security forces. Amongst them, we have renowned artist Ms. Tsitsi Dangarembwa, Ms. Fadzai Mahere, Namatai Kakweza, Odiandalega, who happens to also be this NASU chairperson of Masvingo province, a student at Great Zimbabwe University. These women have been peacefully protesting against government, and some doing it on the form of posting their pictures on social media holding placards, and some marching in single to show their discontent over the recent allegations of corruption that have been happening in the country. But the government still arrests them and charges them with the breach of Section 37 of the Criminal Codification Act, which stipulates that they've been partaking in an unlawful gathering with intent to cause violence.
By their being in government, they have a duty to see that the citizens of Zimbabwe have certain fundamental rights respected. These pertain to things like water, food, clothing, shelter, education, medical care, And then there are the other rights, like the more political rights, like the right to the more political rights, like the right to expression and association, freedom of the press, freedom of movement. You see so few people out today because the army are in many of the locations. They're stopping people moving. They're blocking people's free movement. So the constitutional rights that Zimbabweans have are simply not respected. The army is being deployed against the citizens. Sorry.
And here's what Titi Dangarembo had to say after he released from custody.
Some of the young men that I met at the police station had been taken out and severely tortured and beaten for about 4 hours. One of them so severely that he had a collapsed kidney, and that was a potentially lethal condition, potentially fatal. And so one of the questions they had been asked as they were being beaten was, who is paying you? People could not believe that these two young men could simply decide for themselves that my lived experience in Zimbabwe is not acceptable to me as a human being. I need to do something about it.
For a discussion about all of these issues, I'm joined here by Mr. Samuel Gwenzi, who happens to be the Zimbabwe National Students Union National Coordinator, a human rights expert, and a former student activist. Mr. Gwenzi, please greet the viewers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liam, for bringing me to this platform.
Surely the pleasure is all mine. So, Mr. Gwenzi, given the above mentioned issues, specifically looking at the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter and its relation to the 31 July protest and the human rights situation in Zimbabwe, what say you?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a far more pertinent issue currently, yes. Considering that Zimbabwe has been put on the global agenda by the citizens themselves and not mostly by international institutions like UN, SADC or AU.
Yes.
So the Zimbabwe Lives Matter has actually given a precedence on the human rights situation in the country. Yes. We have witnessed serious state brutality, the non-existence of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and you understand the arrests of the prominent journalist Topro Chingono, yes. and the president of the Transform Zimbabwe, yes. which has got a serious repercussion in the human rights situation in the country.
Yeah, but just to interject a bit, how far imaginable is it a dream, or how effective is the pursuit of hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter, especially when citizens are putting the matters in their own hands?
Yeah, any struggle, even the liberation struggle, came about from the full solidarity and the internationalization of the struggle.
Yes.
And the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter has actually given an effect for the lobbying and advocacy, which is critical to address the human rights situation in the country. It has actually put pressure to the Zimbabwean government. It has actually put pressure to the states within the various nations like South Africa, the African Union, and SADC to put the issue of Zimbabwe with a certain form of priority currently. So now we hope that it's going to put pressure into the key international institutions, but it also put pressure to the Zimbabweans themselves to liberate themselves. There is a level of where the international players, the solidarity will come from, but I believe that it's now high time for the Zimbabwean citizens to lobby and advocate and ensure that they build organic measures to put the government into action and reform, because we really need these critical reforms. It has also exposed our internal remedies to ensure that justice and human rights exist, where our Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is actually quiet, when other institutions and other countries are speaking. You have understand that even the Zimbabwe Media Commission, the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, which are supposed to be the key players in safeguarding and promoting human rights, they have been actually been silent. And far more worse, it has also exposed our key institutions such as the judiciary and parliament, which seems to have been captured more by the executive and have seen that they have no teeth. So basically now it has shown that the people are fighting their own war to ensure democracy and human rights in Zimbabwe. And I believe there is a great chance the goodwill that comes with Zimbabwean Lives Matter will inspire the realization of political economic reforms that guarantee human rights in Zimbabwe.
How then do people find restitution here at home, given the circumstances surrounding them concerning human rights violations from the government?
The state has actually become an enemy of the people, looking at the current situation where instead of the police, which is supposed to be policing the rights and safety of its people, there has been acknowledgement by some human rights institutions and equally the people that have been victims that state apparatus has been used to vindicate such. So the situation is a little bit problematic in our case, because we are living in a polarized society where there is no confidence in our key institutions that are supposed to promote and protect human rights, such as the police, such as the judiciary. But confidence is not lost in finding restitution. I believe we are supposed to put pressure into ensuring that we use the courts in order to find restitution. We are also ensuring that there is more lobbying and advocacy to ensure key political reforms in the country, and that goes to ensure that we capacitate our national human rights institutions, such as the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission currently, which is a sole body that's supposed to be independently monitor and protect human rights.
To what extent and to what degree should we keep on piling this pressure, and is there hope?
Hope is not lost. The people themselves will liberate themselves. Yes. In as far much that we never thought that Zimbabwe would be liberated from the white minority rule. Yes. The same way currently we have to believe that in a democratic Zimbabwe it's very possible to ensure that we enjoy human rights. Although it's a hard tone when we are dealing with authoritarian regimes, yes, but I believe that a coordinated civic society, a coordinated citizen are able to usher the rights as prescribed. We have got a constitution that is actually in existence. Yes. What we need to do is to ensure that we put our constitution into practice. Yes. We expose lies, we also complement that which is good. Yes. And I believe that we have not need to tire in terms of fighting for the opening of the democratic space currently in the country, because in the setup of the authoritarian regimes, they sometimes legalize unjust laws, which they call rule by law, not rule of law. Okay. But what we need to do is to ensure that we fight for key reforms, the key political reforms, instead of amending the constitution, which the government has already tried to put in order to suffocate the democratic space. There's need to amend the constitution to open up the democratic space. Mm. And one of the key issues is to ensure that there is no executive overhead into the dealings of civic participation, like cutting the executive powers of the president, and to ensure that the parliament also has got teeth, and also that our judiciary is not captured. And I believe that effort has already been done since 2009 with the new constitution.
You spoke of state capture. state capture being a source of human rights violations. What do you imply, or what do you mean, and how do you characterize this state capture, and how does it then affect into human rights violations?
Yeah, basically we need to start to look at the situation that we have, that we are coming from what the new leadership called the new dispensation, where they wanted to talk about re-engagement, and they started more with good rhetoric in terms of political reforms, engagement with the international community. But currently our system has actually gone in a default mode of where they are working towards consolidation of power. And less on giving rights to the people. And that's where the situation we are currently in, where those that are in power are trying to consolidate their power by capturing especially the judiciary to rule in their favor, rather than to be a just institution that is supposed to give justice to its people. And also the police and the military, which are supposed to safeguard the territorial integrity and also the protection of citizens, has actually been used to vindicate the people. When you look at how in our constitution it clearly stipulates in section 58 on the right to freedom of assembly, right to, in section 59, the freedom of petition and demonstration. But currently we have seen that such constitutional issues are not being adhered to as the government tries to consolidate power. So that's where we are finding the aspect of state capture. The judiciary and the parliament are no longer doing their cause of ensuring that legislations are put across in parliament that serves the interests of citizens, but instead they are serving the interests of the political elite, which is the executive and those that are in power currently. You look at the issue of Hopo Chingono, who has managed to highlight the issue of corruption, and Maduduzi, who managed to talk about the drugs, which implicate some members of the executive and also the members of the first family. And currently they are in prison right now for speaking out. So these are some of the elements. And one of the other reasons that the state has put across is to say that they want to incite violence by calling for a demonstration, which in any case shows how our judiciary is actually captured in executing. So they are using prosecution to persecute those that speaks out, civic society players, human rights defenders, and actually political activists. So this is the element of state capture in order to try to close the democratic space so that they consolidate their own power.
What we seek to understand is, how do you capture a judge, a learned custodian of the courts? How do you capture a police officer? How do you capture a soldier? And how do you even get to capture an entire member of parliament elected by the people?
The whole aspect is systematic in terms of the capture that we are finding in our country, mostly inspired by corruption and mostly inspired by power. Since the judiciary is appointed by the executive, in many cases they want to safeguard their positions in terms of employment. And also you would find it that the police officers, they serve at the interest of those that are in power. So in any case, if you want to survive and get promoted within the system, and you also want to be on the feeding trough, they will make sure that they capture the key elite within the police force who are able to implement such key human rights abuses that we find ourselves into currently. So this is the kind of capture that we find ourselves of some of our own black men who are now using it to consolidate power, who are using it to corrupt the process. Our institutions are nearly dead currently, which are supposed to promote and protect the rights of the citizens of Zimbabwe.
We've seen the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter, hashtag corruption must go, and you've actually alluded to the fact that state capture as a component of corruption is a source of human rights violations. So then, given the fact that this is an entire regime that is systemized and has roots in every aspect of people. I'm sure the ruling government of Zimbabwe has become a lifestyle for all of us. So then, does this imply pushing for regime change, or it just implies for regime reform, or it's something else with another cause?
Thank you, Comrade Liam. You have actually hammered on what needs to be done to ensure that the realization of human rights become the everyday culture in Zimbabwe. I think one of the things that may be key is that the human rights-based approach to development is very clear. They are the right holders and the duty bearers.
Yes.
And currently the right holders are the citizens. The citizens must actually be able to account, to seek accountability from the government.
Yes.
And it also entails the responsibility of the right holders to participate in key political processes.
Yes.
You choose the leader that you desire.
Yes.
You also have the systems that you desire, because you are a right holder. You deserve free health, you deserve free education. So basically, the citizens have to make a determinant, but there are key human rights principles that are there, which is participation and accountability. And I believe the citizens must rise up and demand key political reforms to ensure that they realize key human rights aspect of the aspect of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, which are non-existent currently in our society. In order to failure for the government of the day or the key leaders that we call for in order to institute change,
yes,
that guarantee human rights. It depends with the citizens to ensure that either they execute regime change or they execute advocates for economic and political reforms. So it depends now with the citizens. And I think one of the things that needs to be done is to ensure that there is citizen urgency to declare by understanding what the Constitution says in terms of political, economic, and social issues that are well presented in our Constitution. I believe our Constitution has got a clear right to freedom to participate in a political gathering of your choice. You've got a freedom to say what you want. You've got a freedom. All of those things are they can be guaranteed only if people are able to claim them. These are not charity cases.
Yes.
They need to be demanded by the people. So I consider the people of Zimbabwe to demand their rights, and that they must make sure that they get their rights.
Knowing hashtags or taglines, especially on Twitter and Instagram or WhatsApp circulating, they're deemed as just, fissure pop culture, right? And it is just discourse that circulates among us, the youth and young people. We make fun out of it or we put it on our statuses. But then to what extent or to what effect does then that guarantee Zimbabweans that they would get redress and justice in terms of human rights issues at home?
Yeah, you have highlighted critical issue because of the Black Lives Matter and the attention, the global attention that it got.
Yes.
One of the things that I think is a positive note is that it has managed to communicate to the world the rights abuses that the Zimbabwean people are facing. Yes. It has also brought up a space where Zimbabwean people who are being denied the right to express themselves are able to express themselves.
Yes.
That's where the hashtag in the various Twitter and Facebook has actually managed to put that expression of the right to express themselves. And I think it also put pressure to key statesmen in terms of having international artists, international figures speaking out on the Zimbabwean issue.
Yes.
It has actually put pressure to the regime. Currently, there are also some of the issues that we can find as progressive and benefits of the Zimbabwean Lives Matter. You could see the what Julius Malema in in South Africa has called for the closure of the Zimbabwean embassy. That's also putting pressure to the regime in Harare to say that they have got no other option but actually to reform. And I believe that the individuals in parliament, opposition in South Africa, they are also going to put up pressure on the government of South Africa to act on the Zimbabwean case.
On that point, Mr. Gwenzi, before you go any further, you spoke about Julius Malema, an opposition leader in South Africa, actually putting pressure on the incumbent president in South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, to actually enforce or order a closure of the Zimbabwean embassy until human rights issues back here at home are addressed, right? So my interesting question is, so do really opposition parties in neighboring territories do give an effect, or do internal political structures within our neighbors or our neighboring territories actually help in addressing these issues? I recall you spoke of international solidarity. So is this the form of international solidarity you were speaking about?
Yeah, basically that's what the South African opposition and also the various people that came to give solidarity to the Zimbabweans using the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter. They've actually exerted pressure of their own governments to act on the Zimbabwean crisis. And we believe that if people scale up that Zimbabwean Lives Matter, it's actually going to give in to the Zimbabwean government to reform.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gwenzi. But then, what's the next stage? What's the way forward from here now, from Zimbabwean Lives Matter, from Twitter, from WhatsApp, from Instagram, from Facebook, from Liam's Snapchat status? Where do we move to?
Yeah, there are several steps. The first thing is that the Zimbabwean people themselves must liberate themselves from the authoritarian regime that we find in Harare. Then secondly, I think one of the things is to pressure international solidarity, like what the Zimbabwean Lives Matter has actually done. But it needs to ensure that despite the closure of space by SADC member states, but to ensure that we execute regional pressure so that the SADC and the AU are able to act on the Zimbabwean case. It's actually more problematic currently, considering that the Harare administration is also holding an influential position in SADC, which makes it very difficult for SADC to make decisions. But I think it's also a space where citizens are able to ensure that they raise as much as possible the issue of Zimbabwe, even if they don't address some of these issues. Then I also think the issue of Zimbabwe has also been topical in the UN, looking at the UN rapporteur who managed to bring about some findings on human rights abuses in the country. So what we can normally do is to put up pressure to the UN director in Zimbabwe so that he may be able to scale up the situation that we find ourselves in. And I also think we now need to challenge, especially our African institutions such as SADC. I think the African Union, there is the African Charter for Human and People's Rights, which has got clear-cut lines of what human rights entail. And the Zimbabwean government is not in any way following these key guidelines in human rights. So it's also one of the platforms that we have to put to the African Union and petition them to ensure that they act considering the various abuses that the Zimbabwean people are facing. And I believe that there is the universal jurisdiction where if we have got enough evidence of human rights abuses in our own country, we can find solace probably in South African courts in order to, even if the challenge that we have is that European Union or European countries have got a supra-legal system where the European Constitution supersedes even that of member states. But in African case, they have been focusing on the issue of sovereignty of member states, which actually is problematic in terms of getting justice, and actually the closure of the SADC tribunal in the late 2000s of the land reform, which was also one of the one of the places where we can find solace in terms of justice.
Yes.
But hope is not lost. I think the people themselves needs to mobilize in as much as what the Zimbabwean Lives Matter have done and seek justice. The streets is also one of the safe space to express themselves despite the repercussions that people find.
Yes.
The social media has also become one of the most forceful tool of advocacy,
yes,
which is also one of the platforms. But I believe now there is now need to have a serious regional offensive where civic society leaders need to reach out to member states in Southern Africa, yes, to say this is the situation that we find ourselves. The temperature needs to be cranked, okay, till the Zimbabwean government feels the heat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gwenzi. And so to you viewers, from the team in the Human Rights Monitoring Platform, it's good night.